Hey everyone, you're listening to the Holistic Navigator podcast, where we believe the body has the capacity to heal itself if given the proper nutrients and care. Thanks for listening today. My name is Brian Strickland. I'm the producer of the show, and here with me in the studio, as always, is your host, Ed Jones. How's your week been, Ed?
Been super duper, Brian. Thank you so much. I actually flew my small airplane yesterday, which helps me immensely on everything from stress to the elimination of brain fog.
Well, on that note, listeners, have you ever just felt that your thinking isn't that clear or that you're just slugging through the day? Chances are we've all felt these symptoms at one point or another, but there was never really a clear term to describe what we felt. Well, brain fog is now a widely used term and can be indicative of memory problems or a lack of concentration and poor focus. And we're bombarded with things that battle for our attention in our culture, so it's no wonder that many of us have a difficult time focusing on the things that matter. Well, today we're going to spend some time talking about the options that are available to help alleviate brain fog and some of the reasons you may be experiencing it. So Ed, to begin, can you just give everyone your definition of brain fog and why it's so prevalent today?
Thank you, Brian. And it is a lengthy conversation, but I'm going to make it quick. So there's a tremendous amount of information to cover. And you asked me before the show, when did this word actually become official, brain fog? And I have to say, being 62 years old, I do not remember any of this being an issue until I'm guessing about the mid 80s is where it kind of started. But before that, unless you had not slept the night before, that was really the only issue. But today I'm going to cover it from A to Z. And again, covering it in a way that's not just painting over the issues, but actually going in and addressing and repairing, which is the only long-term solution that wins in my game of life. Because when you patch something like conventional medicine seems to want to do, the tire will not last very long. And I want you and myself and all the people listening to have a long and healthy and joyous life. And it's hard when you have brain fog. In fact, I read a nice little description yesterday on brain fog, and this person said, "It feels like my mind is like my internet browser. 19 tabs are open, 7 are frozen, and I have no idea where that damn music is coming from." That's a pretty good description, but a little bit more official, of course, it is the slowed speed of cognitive processing or difficulty in working memory. And we've all experienced it. There is no doubt. I don't know of anyone who hasn't. Well, one reason is because sleep is the number one probable reason for the brain to get foggy. But I'm going to go through and do a 3-step program here. One is discussing the number one main reasons why we need to rule these out first before we even go into step 2, which is the repair part of this conversation. And then step 3 is for people who, they're working on their long-term process, but they got a big chore to do tomorrow. And we have to be on top of our game. This is our job. This is our whole career. And I don't have time for the long-term solution to kick in because I only have 24 hours. So I want to give those points also. All right. First off, do have to do my normal disclaimer of we are not treating any medical condition. I'm only here to educate. And you need to ask your healthcare professional if you are dealing with health issues before starting any new program. But here we go. First big step in alleviating brain fog is to rule out significant medical issues. What are those? Just some of those are like blood sugar. We all know that if our blood sugar goes way down or way up, it can disrupt the thinking mind. So we got to make sure that we're not in a pre-diabetic or diabetic state. The liver, the kidneys, chronic inflammation, the immune system that's going crazy because it's fighting something. How many of us have, gotten sick with the flu or some kind of infection? It affects the way that your cognitive abilities are processing. So going to someone who can do a basic good panels to rule out the medical conditions, again, I've found that the insurance companies are getting more and more stingy about these blood tests, and you have to take responsibility to make sure you are receiving what you need to be receiving. But as far as the brain fog, there's other symptoms that go along that we could actually use to describe it. One is low energy, fatigue, headaches, forgetfulness, anxiety, confusion. All of those are part of the package of brain fog. And, there are certain things that we all go through in life that can disrupt this thinking. There's really not much you can do about it in the moment, but one of those is allergies. Believe it or not, having a really sensitive system to ragweed and things floating around can create the brain fog, because the brain is actually out of balance when all of these histamines are being released. Lack of sleep, of course, is predominant reason, but believe it or not, and I'm going to give some bullet points on this that you have not heard anywhere else probably. One is the keto diet. People who do it too strictly, brain fog is a side effect. Too much fasting, even though I'm, again, a massive fan of intermittent fasting. What is that? That is where we're going to eat about 8-hour window of eating, and we're not going to eat for the other 16. Now, I do a 13 and 11 schedule because I tend to have a super fast metabolism, but it is an amazing for your health, but too much, brain fog can occur. So dehydration is the last one of the most prominent reasons of having brain fog. Now, I want to say something that is very, very important. We need to quantify everything. And what that means is, because we're living in an age of technology where we have the magic ability of the apps and the computer at our fingertips, you and I need to be able to monitor things like sleep, energy levels, your weight, have a food log, monitor moods, plug in your supplements, and et cetera, et cetera. The reason we have to do this, we have such a complex life with so many variables. And if you just wing it, which is what many people do, they read an article, they listen to a podcast, I'm going to try this certain thing. There's too many things that affect the outcome, and you will quit most likely. So part 2 of this is the long-term solution. Number 1, cut back on processed foods and clean up your diet. Now, when I say the number 1 is cut back on processed foods, here's the real deal breakers on this. Artificial sweeteners are disastrous to brain fog. Not in everyone. There are people who can drink these Diet Cokes and really not have any issues. And then there's a subset of people that it is poisoning their brain. And NutraSweet and sucralose and aspartame, all of these are affecting your brain activity. Second, under the clean up the food is MSG, monosodium glutamate, which is found in so many Chinese food restaurants, but is found in almost every soup that I eat at any restaurant. And you can ask the cook, do you use MSG? And they will say no, because they're not buying a container and dumping it. It's in the seasoning, and they're not privy enough to even look into the ingredient list, so they just assume it's not in there. And it's also, MSG is used under different terms like natural flavors. How criminal is that? Next is the preservatives, the red dyes. I remember seeing a video in the 1980s of a pediatrician who had children come to their office, and she would have them be on an elimination diet for 30 days, very clean, and then she would introduce 3 drops of different chemicals from food, and one was the red dye. And these kids would come in like normal kids, kind of talkative, maybe not, and within 2 minutes of giving this red dye, they were all over the place, obnoxious, out of control, and it happened within minutes. And this only does this if you're on an elimination diet, because once you do it every day, it becomes the norm. So you don't actually see the massive results that you would give if you had been on that diet. Bad oils, like fried oils. Do you know that your brain is significantly made of fat? That's why when you do oils and it goes into the brain, it's creating oxidation because these bad oils have been heated and they're unhealthy. And like canola oil is awful. And everything fried is old oil that's been sitting in a container for days or weeks and is completely rancid. 2 things in a health food store that are going to cause you brain fog. It took me years to figure out the first one. Stevia. Oh, the worshipped natural sweetener that's found in almost everything. It was my own personal journey that allowed me to find this out. I continued, especially when I got on the keto diet, I use a breakfast drink that is purely keto. And I kept having this brain fog, despite every single attempt I could make to figure it out and to address it. Nothing helped me. And finally, my daughter actually said, Dad, I think stevia is bothering me. So I went on a stevia-free diet. And within 4 days, my brain fog had 100% eliminated. And guess what? It has been gone now for 4 months. I've not had one significant brain fog in 4 months. So keep that in mind. Again, quantify, experiment. It probably doesn't affect most people, but it sure did me. Lastly in this list is probiotics. Do we know that 60% of your brain chemistry is made by the gut microflora? And I can tell you from a fact, if you get a one that's not friendly to your body, and I like to say that, they're not harming you, they're just not friendly, that it can disrupt some of your thinking because half of your brain is in the gut, people, not in the brain. All right, number 2 is we got to have omega-3. Have to. No other way around it. I've talked to 10,000 people over the years, looked at blood testing. I've only found 2 individuals who could supply the optimal amount of omega-3 based on blood work without taking supplements. They were both eating 1 entire can of sardines packed in olive oil every single day. That's a little bit much for me, and many people would not like to do that. So omega-3 from quality brands. Use omega-3 at 2,000 milligrams of EPA DHA every day. Number 3, chronic stress. All of us experience it. And what it is actually an increase in cortisol. And what happens when you do that? When you increase cortisol, you suppress dopamine. Guess what dopamine does, people? The pleasure of life and helps you think. So a lot of us are really walking around numb because we don't have enough dopamine. Of course, the pharmaceutical industry has plenty of nice little candies for you to get prescriptions on, but they all are full of significant side effects. So how do we lower chronic stress? Well, first, we have to address the sleep issues, which we will talk a tiny bit more about in a moment. But the products that I love that helps to balance this cortisol is ashwagandha is an absolute twice-a-day dosing. I live, the rest of my life, I will live taking ashwagandha at morning and afternoon dose. It helps you to balance this cortisol and is super healthy on dozens of different items in our health. Second, rhodiola, similar to ashwagandha, GABA and theanine help to lower the anxiety. We know that many times super anxiety is going to freeze your brain up. And if you're studying for a test and you're having to go to work to do something special or something hugely significant in your life, I like to reduce this anxiety by doing one of 3 things: taking 1 to 2,000 milligrams of GABA and or theanine, which work on a GABA receptor. That is what gives you relaxation and sense of well-being. But there's a product by Terry Naturally called Anxiocalm that is a special type of echinacea that has worked in clinical studies very well. So using ashwagandha every day, rhodiola, and then as needed, GABA, Anxiocalm, or theanine before your event or your stressful moment, if it can be planned. And unholy basil is the last herb that I also sometimes utilize for lowering of cortisol. Now, sleep. You cannot take a magic pill that's going to put you out because that's, again, patching the tire. It is not addressing the underlying issue. And I want you to listen to my podcasts from many, many moons ago. Just go back to the older entries and listen to the one on sleep. Number 5, hormone imbalances. You know, I did an amazing podcast interview, actually 2 of them, with Dr. Scott Resnick, a very well-qualified physician. And so I would encourage you to go into one of our previous podcasts with Scott Resnick on hormone imbalances. Can't get into how to address it, but Dr. Resnick did a very fine job of that. Number 6, unknown food sensitivities. That can be a host of those: lactose, gluten, dyes, dairy, peanuts, strawberries. I did a stool test where it determined my sensitivities. When I say sensitivities, people, this does not always mean allergies. You go to your allergy doctor and he sticks the little needles in your back and says, oh, you're allergic to ragweed. That means there's an immune response. There's a difference between an immune response and a sensitivity. Both of those can be devastating to your body, but most of the time, in my 41 years experience, it is sensitivities, which means there's not an immune response, but there's another response on a different level that is taking your health on a windy road that is not pleasant. Number 7, I've talked of this topic called MTHFR. It is a gene defect that a good percentage of the population has. It has to do with what we call methylation. And it's really kind of like, could be conceived of like a garbage truck coming in and emptying your garbage at night when you're asleep, and everything seems to always stay nice and pretty and roll fine. But just imagine if those garbage trucks did not show up, and how quickly would everything accumulate. And methylation, if it's not proper, is really causing this kind of imbalance. And it's easy to modulate and to control, but you got to know what you're doing. Number 8, medications. We always have to look into that because most conventional people who practice medicine think that they are as safe as M&Ms. And in fact, the word MD stands for more drugs in many cases, not all. There are some amazingly wonderful people in this system, but they also are in a system that I feel is very broken and is not a healthcare system. It is a sick care system. Number 9, dehydration. The brain is full of fat and water. Guess what happens when you don't drink enough clean liquids? I don't mean milkshakes, I don't mean beer, and I don't mean Cokes, people. Clean water. One of the best water filters made is ProPure, P-R-O-P-U-R. It actually takes out fluoride. Any filter that does not take out fluoride is not fully cleaning your water. So that's what you look for. Number 11, low thyroid function. We have done a wonderful podcast on how you can, at your house, monitor if your thyroid is optimal by using a thermometer first thing in the morning. I tell all the details of that on the podcast on thyroid. Number 12, neurotoxins. What are neurotoxins? They are things like plastics, heavy metals, air fresheners, flame retardants, pesticides, formaldehyde, things that we cannot run from. They're everywhere. So you have to clean up your environment, especially your house. Number 13, mold and yeast. Mold. Oh my gosh. If you listen to my podcast 3 or 4 podcasts ago on mold, you'll understand the implications and how you can check whether you have mold in your body with a simple, inexpensive visual test on the computer. EMFs, electromagnetic fields. There is no doubt this will be the same as cigarettes were in the 50s, where it was, well, we think it's okay, so don't worry about it. EMFs are going to be similar as the years go on. Please buy a phone case that blocks it and put your phone at least 6 feet away when you go to sleep at night. Number 14 is intermittent fasting. I love it. You have to experiment with it. It is a key to longevity. Now, so we've covered how are we going to fix the machine in the long run. These are all the steps. Again, quantify, see what you need, put them in place. But tomorrow is a big day for you. You have to take a big test. You have to go to work and give a speech. You have to create something, and your life really depends on it. So like I did this morning before I walked into this podcast room, here's the quick and immediate fix options for you. Number one, I love the herb mushroom lion's mane. Lion's mane is one of the strongest mental stimulants there is. I did a liquid version by a company that's owned by Paul Stamets, which he's an amazing individual. He probably can change the world with his knowledge of mushrooms. Second, bulletproof coffee. I saw Dave Asprey out in California about 2 years ago. He's always been one of my mentors. He's just on top of the game. What is bulletproof? It's where you mix 1 tablespoon of MCT, 1 tablespoon of butter with hot coffee, and you blend it. It gives you long-term energy and also a quick boost to the brain. The other thing I did this morning, essential oils, the one named rosemary. Rosemary applied to my wrist on both sides, especially by good companies like Pranaram or Garden of Life or a few others, is truly amazing for brain focus. Don't trust most essential oil companies. They only smell good and they do nothing. Using choline, alpha GPC is long-term or short-term, will kick your butt up. Microdosing, believe it or not, I can't believe I'm saying this, but microdosing, if it's a huge deal breaker for you and you have to get it done, a small amount of nicotine/caffeine. Do you know that nicotine and caffeine is nature's 2 original smart drugs? And then breathing, the Buteyko breathing that I spoke about on the breathing podcast, you got to listen to, people, because it is a game changer. I can't finish without saying Adderall. Do not do Adderall. The risk against benefit is far too large and is addictive. So please don't follow the recommendations of many people. Again, quantify everything. You got to monitor what's going on in your life in order to fix and find the results that you need. So that is pretty much going to wrap up the quick conversation of brain fog. I can assure you, if you embrace those, quantify, use your wisdom, you will find significant results, because life is so worth living. But if you have a big pair of glasses over your eyes and your ears and you can't think clearly, you kind of just walk away and walk around in a very gray twilight, is a word that Roosevelt used long ago. You know, there was a guy I really respect who wrote a book called Pain Free, and his name is Egoscue. And I always loved his first page of his book. It says, it has become obligatory for health books to carry legal disclaimers. You've read them. The following material is not intended as a substitute for the advice of a physician. And they go on to recommend that you consult a doctor before embarking on whatever program is being offered. As I did in my first book, he says, I will again urge readers who feel the need for this disclaimer, protection, and counsel to close these covers of my book and leave the pages unread. My working principle as an author and therapist is that the most important consultation is the one a person has with himself or herself. Healthcare starts with personal responsibility, people. Any disclaimer that suggests otherwise does a great disservice. But I have to be legal and say, check with your doctor if you got health concerns before trying or doing anything else. And do remember, if a doctor cannot do you good, he must be kept from doing harm. Hippocrates.
Thanks for listening to the Holistic Navigator podcast. For more information, previous episodes, and other resources, visit www.theholisticnavigator.com. The information on this podcast and the topics discussed have not been evaluated by the FDA or anyone of the medical profession and is not aimed to replace any advice you may receive from your medical practitioner. The Holistic Navigator assumes no responsibility or liability whatsoever on the behalf of any purchaser or reader of these materials. The Holistic Navigator is not a doctor, nor does he claim to be. Please consult your physician before beginning any health regimen.